Hey everybody, I'm Rob Childs, a Rapier swordsman out of the United States, and today's video is going to be a little bit different than what you normally see on my YouTube channel. This is not going to be an instructional on how to stab your friends with pointy metal objects, and nor is this an update video on the current progress at the castle property. Instead, this is going to be a response video in response to a video that was brought to my attention by one of the subscribers to my YouTube channel. And it's a video put out by Oz Ostwick, apologies if I butchered that name at all. But the title of the video is The Reason No One Respects HEMA. I myself wasn't aware there was a respect issue within HEMA, I mean aside from maybe one club to another, but I thought it would be an interesting project, so I took a look at it, and what follows are my thoughts on the validity of the points made by Oz and why he believes no one respects HEMA. Okay, so if I was going to do a response video, I needed to make sure that I understood all of the points being made. So the first thing I did was to watch Oz's video several times. And I think the evidence that he presents boils down to three main points. The first of which he has as, the researchers diving into the tomes are typically not the kind of people who excel at the application of the arts they are studying. Because the HEMA scholar and the HEMA martial artist who excels at violence are two different people, this is one of the reasons HEMA has not become a global phenomenon. Now, admittedly, I don't see how those two things connect. Let's look at it from a perspective of what is HEMA overall, right? What kind of people does HEMA have within it? Well, if you have the scholar who is diving their nose into those tomes and diving their nose into the ancient manuscripts and trying to understand all of the knowledge that was written down then, and you have an individual who is gifted at violence, is gifted with the sword, is able to apply what it was that they were taught, what they are currently learning. Let's say, for example, that it exists universally as only scholars and only those that are gifted. Well, if both of those individuals are in HEMA, well, then the martial artist has that scholar from which to be able to learn these things, and the scholar has that martial artist to be able to learn the things that can't really be transmitted down through in the written word. They're going to be able to learn from each other, and if both exist in HEMA, I don't see why the fact that they would be existing separately would actually be a reason why no one would respect HEMA. I'm not putting two and two together on that one, so I have to say that I disagree with that point. So the second point that Oz makes is that he has seen Olympic fencers utilizing only sport technique completely defeat a HEMA practitioner who is practicing whatever particular period master they happen to favor. And yeah, I have seen that as well. But I have also seen HEMA practitioners completely trounce Olympic fencers who are using, again, just sporting technique. I'm one of them. I think it comes down to basically you have to understand that the Olympic fencer who has, say, for example, 10 years experience, but that person takes on somebody who has been practicing HEMA, let's say, I don't know, Destreza or Tivo or insert period master here. That Olympic fencer with 10 years experience is going to beat, in all likelihood, that HEMA practitioner who's only been practicing for a few years. But it's not because sport technique is better than HEMA technique. It is because that person has more experience. They have a greater understanding of measure and tempo. They know the parry and the riposte, and they've been placing that in their reflexes for, a decade, as opposed to the HEMA practitioner who's only been practicing for a few years. But by that same token, if you reverse it and you take a HEMA practitioner who's been practicing for 10 years and an Olympic sport fencer who's only been at it for a few years, well, you're going to see that HEMA fencer in all likelihood is going to trounce that Olympic fencer. The two systems are entirely different. You might as well be trying to combine, or I should say compare, badminton to tennis. Although they both utilize a racket and they both utilize something that you are hitting, those are two entirely different techniques. Now, when you're talking about HEMA itself, if you are practicing from the martial perspective, if that is your goal, then HEMA is definitely the way for you. If you are wanting to practice a sport, if you're wanting to do Olympic fencing because that is what interests you because of whatever reason, you like the athleticism, you like the workout that it gives you, then that is definitely the thing for you. But what it does not prove by putting one fencer against another fencer from the two different realms is that one is better than the other. Now, I personally, from my perspective, I prefer to practice the martial side. I went into sword fighting in the first place. Admittedly, I started off as an Olympic fencer. But why? Because that was the only game in town. That was the only thing I had available to me. I knew that I wanted to practice sword play, and Olympic fencing at that time, at the tender age of 17, is what I had available to me. And I will say, I learned a great deal that I very much applied into my practice of my rapier combat art. I learned measure, and I learned timing, and I learned how to reflexively program a parry riposte. I have learned to program a great many things over the course of the 35 years I've been practicing. But it is a different concept, technique, mindset when you're talking about a HEMA practice versus that of a sport practice. Now, I will tell you that it is my own personal opinion that if you were to put two fencers of equal experience, right? You've got a 20-year HEMA practitioner and you've got a 20-year Olympic fencer. If you were to put those two in a duel where, we're talking sharps, I do think that the advantage lies with the HEMA practitioner, especially if that person is particularly dedicated to their practice. But if you're talking about just simply scoring for points and not caring about really worrying about the defense part of it, because let's face it, in Olympic sport fencing, say épée fencing, for example, if you're not familiar, épée fencing is really only got one rule, and that is to hit your opponent 1/25th of a second faster than he hit you. Now, that's great in an Olympic contest if you can manage that, because if I hit my opponent 1/25th of a second faster, I'm the only one who gets a point. But in a duel, if you have actual swords in your hands, if I hit my opponent 1/25th of a second faster than he hits me, what happens then? Yeah, you get the picture. You're both dead on the field. And while that's a very period way to die, that's not really acceptable. The HEMA practitioner, if they're doing it right, in my opinion, is practicing to be the only one who survives the fight. It's not a game of tag. It's not seeing who can hit who first. It is about actually exercising a technique that allows you to survive the fight. And that is what I myself practice. I know there are a great many other martial artists out there who practice it the same way. And if you're a person who is trying to say that Olympic fencers beating a HEMA fencer is somehow some kind of proof, I think that's a weak argument. I don't think that's actually going to be sufficient proof, because I have personal experience in this, and having been a sport fencer and now having been, practicing with the rapier for decades, I can tell you that when you apply your art to a sport fencer's technique, I have firsthand experience of telling you that HEMA practitioner is going to come out on top. So the third and final piece that I took from Oz's video, titled, again, "The Reason No One Respects HEMA," he says the following: "The better you are as a fighter, the more the scholars try to say that what you are doing is not historical." Now, taking that statement at face value, whether you believe it or whether you don't, either way, I don't see how that answer would actually lend itself as evidence to why HEMA would not be respected with whatever group or organization that he's referencing. Now, taking the statement just as what he says, it is absolutely true. I cannot even begin to tell you how many times I have run into somebody telling me that what I do is not historical, what I do is not period. Now, the only way that I will actually cede the point to them is in saying, because what they really mean when they say what you're doing is not historical, they mean to say that what you're doing is not Saviolo, it's not Fabris, it's not Capoferro, it's not insert period master here. What you're doing is some sort of mixture. What you're doing is some sort of improvisation. That's what they mean when they say what you're doing is not historical. Now, I completely disagree with them from the standpoint of being historical. Think of it this way. Look at all of the fencers that you know who are the top tier of whatever particular weapon. Longsword, rapier, saber, doesn't matter. Look at all of those individuals. The top fencers, at least in my experience, have always been individuals who were not adherents of one particular style. Whether they mean to or not, they are exercising things in their style during the fire of combat that has nothing to do with the period style that they profess to prefer. Now, a lot of those individuals understand already that if they are going to be their best fencer, then they have to do what is attuned to their particular strengths, to their particular reflexes, the things that make sense, that are logical. The parts of these different styles is what helps them to become their best fencer. So absolutely, these best fencers are the best precisely because they're not limiting themselves to just one particular style. Now, bear with me for just a moment as I try to expound even just a little bit further on that. When someone tries to say that another fencer is not period, is not historical. It is my opinion that these individuals are forgetting precisely what it was that led to us having all of these manuals left behind by Saviolo, Capoferro, again, all of the period masters that we currently have works of. And that is, let's say, for example, Capoferro is born into the world, right? Did he come into this world with all of the knowledge already that made Capoferro's style what we know of it today? No, of course not. He came in just as all of us did, completely ignorant of all of the knowledge that was out there. But he learned, he grew, he became better, and then he started changing that which he had learned in order to accommodate what was his greatest strengths. He made changes because he felt he was improving the style to become something that was more than it was before. And hence the reason now we know his name to this day, precisely because he learned everything that he could and then he changed it. And now he wrote a book, we've got it to this day, and it's known as Capoferro's style, or Fabris's style, or Thibault's style, etc., etc. Now, lastly, I will say this. When someone is trying to say that you are not historical, so what? If your goal is to be the best practitioner of a period master's style, then by God, you should go forth and do what makes you happy. We need people like that anyway. I mean, I don't know about you, but these are some of the people that I find some of the greatest resources for trying to find out if something that I'm doing works or something that I'm doing can be made better. But if you are also a different kind of person, you're the kind of person instead who wants to be the best swordsman they can possibly be, I'm telling you right now, you're not going to do that by applying yourself to just one particular style. You have to understand that all of the period masters whose names we know today, they had their individual strengths, their individual weaknesses, their individual thought processes. They had a different way than you do, precisely because they are different people than you are. So if you're going to be your best swordsman, and this is just my advice to you, if that is what you seek to do, you have to learn from multiple sources. You have to take that which makes sense, that which is logical. Some of the things might even be completely unorthodox. But if it works for you and it works in a combat setting, then clearly there is something to it. So just to summarize, I do believe that Oz's assertions, some of what he says is true. I disagree with some of the other things that he had said, but even if all of it was true, I don't see how that would lend itself to a reason why no one respects HEMA. Honestly, I was not aware that this was a problem. I don't know who he is speaking of, but if you wanted to put forth some reasons why no one respects HEMA, I don't think this is a really strong argument that lends itself to convincing anyone of that particular perspective. But I highly encourage you to make up your own mind about it. Go and take a look at the video. If you do a search on YouTube and you just type in the reason no one respects HEMA, you're going to find that video pops up as one of the first search results. Watch it yourself, make up your own mind, and tell me in the comments whether or not you agree with what I've said.